Hello, hello. Welcome to our Oli Garden live stream. My name is Juraci Paixão Crolin. I'm a software engineer, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about vibe coding or vibe instrumenting our microservices. Since the beginning of the year, I've been doing a lot of code for OD Garden, and one of the things that I'm trying to do as much as I can is vibe code some of our code, right? Of course, there's always a human before merging the code, doing the reviews, but I'm trying to make things in a way that things might be done in the future, right? So perhaps people in the future are gonna do most of their coding through coding agents. And I'm trying to do that myself today to see what are the shortcomings of that. And how can we make instrumentation better for the people who are doing that kind of workflow right now. Now, I've doing that myself, I came up with a few prompts or a few context files that I'm using on a daily basis. They work quite well, I have to say. And when thinking about this presentation here, this live demo, I recalled an MCP server done by a friend of mine, Adriel, and I'm going to call Adriel in a couple of minutes. So that's the context for this conversation here today. So for the next half an hour, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can add those AI coding agents into the workflow, and how do we see the future? How can we extrapolate from where we are today into the future? How do we envision things being done in the future? And how can these learnings that we are gathering today help us in scaling ourselves for the future? Before doing that, a few words about Oli Garden. This is our third live stream. I'm very happy about this one. This is very much not structured, right? So we are not trying to sell you anything here. This is really just half an hour for us to talk about some things. Some of you know me from my other projects like telemetry jobs, where I create content also in English, an evolution of what we had in Dose de Telemetria in Portuguese, where for a few years now I've been opening a live stream every Friday for half an hour to talk about open telemetry in Portuguese. Now this one here is a little bit different, so we focus on the problems that we are solving at OD Garden. And one of the problems that we're solving, or the biggest problem that we're solving at OD Garden, is we are very concerned about the quality of instrumentation out there. We think we don't think, we believe strongly that a big problem in the current tooling nowadays is that we are generating a lot of that data, and a lot of that data is bad data. So there's a lot of bad telemetry out there. That's our tagline, and we are here to solve that. We believe in efficient telemetry pipelines, and an efficient telemetry pipeline it starts at efficient telemetry being collected, right? So the pipeline for us starts at the very beginning, where applications are instrumented. So that's the very beginning of the pipeline. If we can get good data out of that already, then the pipeline as a whole can be improved, can be done more efficiently. Now, this is pretty much all that I have for the context for today's conversation, and I'm gonna call here Adriel. There you go. There you are. Hey, Adriel, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very good, very good. Thank you very much for joining the conversation here today. I know you have a thing or two to talk about instrumentation. I heard that you are a huge fan of vibe coding things.
Yep, that's every person who knows me knows I'm a huge fan. Taste the sarcasm for sure.
So, Adriel, I was talking to a few other people this week about vibe coding or instrumenting or clothing. Some people are calling that clothing nowadays, which I think is fair. But what is your experience there? I mean, what worked and what hasn't worked yet for you?
Yeah, I try to use AI as a learning tool more than anything else. When I have certainly taken a stab at vibe coding, but I think there's a DHH said it really well on a podcast one day. He's like, he feels the competency draining out of his body the more that the LLM writes the code. And I certainly feel that same sentiment. So I really like to use it as an investigative tool, understanding what's going on. I do let it write some code, absolutely. Sometimes I let it write my tests, for example. But usually I'm trying to solve different problems. And so I'm like very tactfully pointing it in a direction. And of course, I did use it to build out the instrumentation MCP as well and add functionality to it.
Cool. So let's go there then. I mean, I have so many questions and so many things to ask you. But what is this MCP server that you mentioned?
Yeah, so the OTel instrumentation MCP server is geared at getting you very tactical information about OpenTelemetry, about its semantic conventions, about the different examples that you have for the different languages for like instrumenting your code, whether it be traces, metrics, or logs. And it's also geared at getting some of the instrumentation score specification information, which really helps you improve the quality of your traces and your telemetry and your system. And so that was the goal of it. I wasn't the original creator, just to be clear. Sasha Sharma over at Honeycomb originally created a little prototype and published it. And I was like, this is awesome. Let's make it better. Let's add some features. Let's add some tools. And let's add the instrumentation score, of course, and then also be able to run it in production so that like at our company, anyone can just go ahead and configure their agentic solution to point to the MCP.
And how does this MCP work? I mean, how did you add this knowledge to the MCP? It's just like copying the sources there and that's it? Or did you do some other preparation or I don't know, tell us more.
Yeah, great question. So it's got two main things that are built into the MCPs. MCPs have like a lot of different pieces of functionality that they can support. Like they can do sampling for you. There's like elicitations and all these other fancy words. But the two main ones that this MCP focuses on is tools, which, you know, most agents are going to have some set of tools available to them, right? So like reading from the file system is a tool. And so like your Claude Code, for example, is going to be able to quickly do that, call that tool, or it may fetch something from the internet. So the MCP server actually has a dedicated list of tools that are available to it. And then it also has some prompts that help you like fine tune the direction that gets sent to the LLM so that it can be like, okay, this is supplementary information. This is like what I want to do with this tool, with this information. But fundamentally, queries GitHub is what it does behind the scenes, and it queries specific repositories in the OpenTelemetry space and of course the instrumentation space and pulls down subsets of information via those tools.
Nice. So you don't check out the code at runtime or at build time, if there is such a build time. So you in real time you go to the GitHub repositories and you query for the latest data there.
Yep. Or by a specific version. So I think semantic versions have a lot of different versions as an example. Right. So it's really helpful to be able to say, well, like I'm looking for 136, or like I'm living months in the past, I'm looking for 120, right? And so you can query based off of those specific versions.
So I guess that's, so when I was starting with Oli Garden and writing code with AI coding tools at the beginning. So of course when I started, I did things on my own. Like I know how to code, so I can do it myself. But when I saw how things were going in this AI area, I thought like I should try it out. And one of the things that I did try was, okay, so instrument this code for me. And it was so bad. Like it had knowledge from like 5 years ago, and okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but things that it would add like deployment.environment. That's it. So deployment.environment, and I knew it was old. Like it's deployment environment name. So there's a name in that. So that was added afterwards, and even today. So we are also using CodeRabbit for code reviews, and whenever I commit something that has deployment.environment.name, it complains that it should be deployment.environment. So that just shows that not all of the knowledge that LLMs have right now or the models have right now are to be trusted. And I think that's where the MCP that you build comes in. Like, so it helps steer LLMs or the model in a direction showing what is the most accurate data right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, there's different approaches to that. Like, I think a lot of people talk about RAG as an approach to that. But I found that like the specificity of the tools of an MCP server have really like done the best job that I can find of really keeping it targeted in a specific area. It's really helpful, and it provides a significantly better result, because you do have that problem of like old data, but then you also have the problem of like, for example, maybe in the wild, this would be my speculative guess here, is that the deployment environment, because it lived for so long before it switched to deployment.environment name, there's probably a lot more examples in the wild of deployment environment. So not only do you have like older data, but you also have like that weighting bias of there's just more of that in the data set that the LLMs exist with. So you're going to run into those problems all the time. Like Docker Compose is a good one for me. All the time it's trying to do stuff in Docker Compose, and I'm like, nope, I don't want Docker Compose. I know it's been tried and true, but I would much rather use something new like Tilt, which is just running your cluster locally in a very effective manner. So you're going to have those problems for sure with LLMs.
What about the context for that? I mean, do you provide only what is necessary as part of the MCP, or do you just give it all of the information that you have? Like, how do you filter what is relevant, what is not for the current query?
So in my query, in my prompt, I will usually say something along the lines of use the MCP tools at your disposal to analyze and use some keywords. And usually the LLM is statistically likely enough or smart enough to figure out that because this word exists in this prompt, I might have a tool that somewhat resembles that, right? So usually I'll try to guide it in that manner, because I found that various different agents will often not call configured MCP tools unless you tell them to, or unless you provide that additional like keyword guidance there. But that's usually what I will do. And my prompts are usually very hyper specific. Not like overly, I'm not trying to write like 20 paragraphs of stuff here. But I'm definitely like, the thought I feel like is very specific thought. So I'll give you an example with the instrumentation score. I was analyzing the OTel instrumentation MCP by using the OTel instrumentation MCP to analyze the telemetry that has been built into there. And I wanted to understand like how qualitative is it. And so the prompt that I used to analyze that was, hey, call the MCP tools configured for open code and use them to analyze the repository again based off of the instrumentation score. And so that specificity, while not like a paragraph, was enough for it to realize I have a tool. That tool has something about instrumentation score in it. I know that I should use that tool. Boom, I'm going to call the tool, and then I'm going to just continue that cycle.
That's so cool. That's so nice. I'm just going to make a pause and show what I have in terms of context. And then we're gonna see what you have there, because I think yours is more advanced. So let's start with the basics, and then we look at how we can do it better, and then perhaps we can take a stab at predicting the future, like where to take from here. Like, now that we have an MCP server, now that we have like those tools helping us steer models in the right direction, what can we do with that? But before that, let me share then my screen with y'all. So this is so I try to prepare. The idea for those live streams is not to prepare anything at all. Just come in here and talk and show, and make it real. Like, keep it real, not keep it like for a presentation. That's not the purpose. But I try to, because we have so many microservices here at Oli Garden, that I try to make it a little bit focused. So perhaps Adriel knows already that our microservices, they follow the botanical theme. Like Hummingbird is our microservice that detects when there's too many spans in a second, because the wings that from hummingbirds, they flip so fast, like 1,000 times a second. I don't know how many. So this is a service that detects services that are overly instrumented with spans, or spans that are too fast. They should not be there. And this one here was not very well instrumented. Like, this is one of the services that I mostly vibe coded, and I let the I know it sounds bad, but I let the bad instrumentation go in and see what is the result of it. Like, we have to understand, we have to understand what are the problems with bad instrumentation, right? So we intuitively know but we have to prove it. And it was worse before, but then we fixed a little things, small things here and there. But what I've done is I have a repository called AI context. And within that, I have a few directories here. There are like coding agents or sub-agents, I think they're called in Cloud Code, and I think they're called agents and sub-agents on Open Code as well. And then in here, I have like the agents saying, this is the Go observability engineer. This should be engaged proactively. And this is one example. This is another example. And then the full prompt here, like you should proactively engage whenever there is a mention of OpenTelemetry, OTel, and so on and so forth. And then I just say, read those files, read those other context files, and that's it, right? So that's what I have. And then some things to reinforce, like always call the naming observability engineer first, because I have a specific agent for naming things. So we have a set of blog posts that are coming. So one was published today, but one was published a couple of weeks ago on how to name spans. So those rules and all the rules that we learned over the years, they are encoded in this naming.mg file, in this context file. So the purpose of this agent here is to use that one to help me analyze what are the names of the spans that I'm generating. So what I can do here is I can go to Hummingbird, and then I have a symlink here to the context, right? So I don't have to make references, and it's easier to reference. But I think it's specifically in Open Code, it's harder to reference things outside of the repository that you are. Within Cloud Code, it's actually easier. So I don't know what's going on in there. But nowadays, what I do is I just symlink, or I just copy it. I do also Git work trees to have a copy of the repository here. And what I would do then here, I'll just, this is kind of bad. So what I would just do here is something like use the naming observability engineer. This is actually wrong. So use the, it's because I removed from the, okay, so that's fine. So use the naming context to write a report about the span, the bad span names that we have in this repository. And that's it, right? So what I have at the end of this process here I have a list of the spans that I have for this application that are not following the rules that I established for my organization, right? So, and what I can do here as well is something that is happening at Oli Garden. I thought it wouldn't happen. We store like the organization ID as an attribute or on the spans, so that we know which request belongs to which organization. And one thing that I kept telling people when I first got the idea for Oli Garden is, companies have a cluster.name and cluster underscore name as part of their attributes. Turns out we are making the same mistakes. We have org ID, we have org, we have organization.id, and we have organization. So what I'm doing now is we have a specific context file where we are running on GitHub to tell us like, this should be done differently. This should be organization.id, following the patterns that we established for the whole organization. So this is going to take a while now. The code base is not big, but I think Opus 4, which probably is the model that I'm using, is a little bit slower than the other ones. But we can come back to this one here later and see what was the result. And perhaps in between, Adriel, we could see what you have to show us.
Sure. I think honestly, like your stuff is more advanced than my stuff, because I have not been like, I've tried a lot of different approaches. I've used Windsurf as an example. Claude and the CLI, the TUI has always been my favorite. But then I switched over to Open Code. And I've been keeping it pretty simple, and I found that simplicity kind of really works well for at least my flow. But I'm also a Vim user, so take that for what it is. Let me share my screen here. So this is the OTel instrumentation at MCP. Now I'm running it So I'm actually doing a remote thing here. But if I look at my open code, global open code JSON configuration, I only have 2 MCP servers configured, and that's context 7 because I like to get the latest docs. Again, same problem we mentioned. That one's a publicly available one. And then the OTel MCP itself that we're self-hosting internally. So usually I just will have 2 windows side by side. One is going to have Vim, one is going to have open code. Sometimes I'll go back and forth between the 2. And I will switch models as well. Sometimes I switch a lot between plan mode and build mode. Of course, you can definitely do a lot of different specific agents. So you had a specific agent that was geared towards instrumentation, as an example, I think is what you showed. I don't have any of those. I just have the bare bones build and plan. And usually I'll start in plan just for investigative measures. Or sometimes I'll just start and build and tell it, hey, don't change anything. Because that's really the difference between a plan and a build mode is the plan mode is not going to change anything. The build mode is going to allow you to change stuff. So I'll just inject that into the prompt myself. And that way I don't have to accept all the commands that would run for grepping on the local file system within that folder path because I trust it. But if we look at some of the sessions, I think one of my favorite things is this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. I think it's running, right? Here we go. Now it's running. The session was cached. So all I did was ask it to, again, that same prompt I mentioned earlier was to analyze the repository based off of the instrumentation score. And I think what's always interesting for me is that you can actually see the tools that are being called, which in terms of using this as a learning device, it's nice because you get to see exactly okay, this is the tool it called, this is the response it got. How is it going to infer things from that response? And so this is generating an instrumentation score. The irony is this is a calculation, and now LLMs do have some built-in things that do math behind the scenes, but it's still not 100% accurate, though this is close. So the current score it estimated off of just the source code is 85 to 90%. Now, what's cool for me is I actually know the real score. And I know the real score because I send you my data. And so I get to go into Ollie Garden and I can look at the OTel instrumentation MCP instrumentation score. And I'm at 92% for this MCP in your calculation. So this is not off. And I think when I take it in the vein of, yeah, I know this is an estimate. I know that this is going to be probably close, but not 100% statistically accurate. Then I can reason about it. Okay, where should I go next? And so some of the things that this one doesn't have it. There was another one that did have it, but one of the things it doesn't know about is that I have Kubernetes attributes on my instrumentation server, and that's because I'm running in Kubernetes and the OTel collector is injecting those attributes for me, but I don't have them codified anywhere in this repository. So it wouldn't know about it on its analysis of this repository, but you do because you get my data and you get to see that end result. And so that's where it's really important. And I'm excited for the future of where I can hook this into another MCP for Ollie Garden that actually gives me my information from the services as you've calculated those scores, because that would help further provide better direction for where I should improve in my qualitative instrumentation with whatever service that I have in play. And so that feedback cycle is really nice. I did use Claude on the instrumentation MCP server at one point because I wanted to use the Honeycomb MCP. And I had a really weird cycle where I was like, okay, instrument based off of the semantic conventions, and then go look at the traces in Honeycomb that we just sent, call the tool, get those traces back, and then identify areas for improvement, which is really, really fun. So like there's lots of creative things that you can do, but again, for discoverability and learning, I think this can actually be pretty powerful if you use it correctly. And so that's what I like about it. Again, I just showed you the instrumentation score, but if I wanted to say like analyze this repository for the HTTP semantic, let's do deployment name or deployment attributes and HTTP attributes on version 1.36.0 of semantic conventions using the MCP tools. Let's see what it says. It might blow up my context window because that can happen with the amount of information that can come back from a given, like the semantic conventions has a lot of data. But when I provided that specificity for just like looking at HTTP, it looks like it didn't. That's not surprising. Hey, look at that. You mentioned deployment environment. It said, hey, by the way, this should be deployment environment. So it got it right. And it also realized that I don't have any of those attributes for deployment in there. So lots of cool things you can do. And again, it's like a good analyzer for stuff that's meaningful and you want to see it in production. It like really helps accelerate the observability driven development experience, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question here. So Zachary asked if this is the right repository for the MCP server that you're talking about, the github.com/liatrio-labs/hotel-instrumentation-mcp.
Yep, that's it.
One? Cool. Yeah. Nice. That's very cool. So how do you, so thinking about the future, like now that we're building those basic building blocks, so I see the current tooling that we have as the very beginning of a long story. And those are the base building blocks. Of course, it's strange to say that we are the basics because there are so many layers down below us. But we are now building the foundation of the new tools for the future. And I think this is one of those, like an MCP server for instrumentation is one of them. What is the next one? Like, what can we go from here? Let's just brainstorm the future.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely a lot. I think there's probably going to be a balance at some point because I know there's a lot of talk about having multiple agents that are like self-managed and agents talking to agents. And while that can be like effective for things like stock trading and stock analysis at some point, there's also a lot of margin for error with these things. And as a human, I only have mental capacity to be able to keep like 1, 2, maybe 3 things on track at a given time. Now I will often use 2 agents at a time. Some like when I'm trying to if I have an idea and I'm like deep in the weeds on a specific area of things, I may pop into another terminal, open an agent and say, hey, go validate that this thing is correct. Cause it's again, a discovery and research tool that will point me in a direction when I come back to that thought later. And that's pretty helpful. But in terms of MCPs, I think really hooking in your local development environment to I use Aspire as an example when I'm instrumenting locally. Sometimes I use other tools, but having an MCP to talk and look at the traces in Aspire when you're running locally would be super helpful because then you could have that feedback cycle of okay, instrument, observe, instrument, observe the instrumentation. Where are we going? Do we have good things in place? So that might be one thing. What do you think? Or you have any ideas of where you want to go?
It resonates a lot because what you mentioned, you are dipping the weeds in something and then you have an idea and you just want that idea be experimented in some way. That's exactly how I started doing the analysis of the instrumentation because I was going to a conference and I was coding a specific service, and at the same time I looked at my tracing tool and I saw a trace that was overly verbose. And I just copied the whole trace, the JSON file for the trace. I downloaded manually. And then I asked Cloud Code back then on one session, like, just analyze this one here and tell me what is wrong. Like, this is clearly wrong, I know, but tell me what is wrong here. And that's it. And then I went back to code to do what I was doing. And when I look back, it gave me exactly the things that I wanted to fix, right? So it made sense. It saw a lot of spans in there. So I had no context back then. So it did an actual good job in just looking at the data as it was, raw data, and giving some ideas. So once I got that response from I forgot what tooling I was using back then. I think it might have been Cursor. When I got the response back, I just went there and say, now implement the changes. And when it implemented the changes, then it was bad. Like, it was really bad. And that's the beginning of my context. So I started doing the context files back then, because then I was trying to steer Cursor in the right direction. Like, yes, you were right that this is overly verbose. But now here are the rules. And once I wrote down the rules, like span names should be following the verb object pattern and so on. When I did that, then it started doing things in a better way. And it's actually why I wrote the blog post, because now that I have all of those rules written down in context files, things that I had in my head before, now I can reuse that knowledge. I can spread that knowledge. I can just give this information to people as blog posts, both to the blog at .only.garden, but also opentelemetry.io. So I think the blog post might be published today or tomorrow, the one about span attribute names. But I think one of the good things about writing down the context is it forces you to think about the problem in a way that you kind of intuitively got by osmosis before, but now you have to write down, like, you have to sit and think about it, because now you have to explain to an agent or to a person, but you have to explain now, and then you write down. Now, going back to the original point, where are we going? I'm experimenting with Cloud AI. What is the name? Cloud Code SDK. So the idea would be to have those agents running at the CI/CD or CI, but based on the knowledge that I'm providing that. So instead of me from time to time running my prompts and telling me what is wrong about my instrumentation, so perhaps I could hook that into CI. And then whenever there is a new PR, I can have a code reviewer, observability engineer, to look at my changes and say, based on instrumentation score that you have here, you might want to take a look at this one here. Now that you are looking at this part of the code, you can fix it in this way. I don't know if that's going to work. That's part of the experiment, I think. But I'm very excited about the future of instrumentation, actually. I think that for far too long, we were having a discussion about auto instrumentation versus manual instrumentation. Auto instrumentation bringing information right now for people who need information right now, versus manual instrumentation, which is high quality, high fidelity, or high quality data that doesn't cost you that much. And this tension might go away, hopefully, in the future, when we have the performance gains and the productivity gains from auto instrumentation and being done during the instrumentation, like the coding phase of the software development, not at the runtime.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there, but on the auto instrumentation side, no, you're good. On the auto instrumentation side, it's like, you can get, this is basically like the new auto instrumentation in my mind.
Yeah,
exactly. Where it's like, okay, like I need a starting place, like bytecode, intentional, purposeful instrumentation. I have had that conversation, like is the goal. Like that's, I think, the ideal state. Well, you can accelerate that a lot quicker, and you don't have to worry about like any libraries being monkey patched in or anything like that, right? You just, hey, I want this stuff out of the box. Great, let me get a starting point. And I enjoy writing instrumentation. Like I have definitely experienced okay, I'm going to instrument everything as I go through. It is a fun kind of exercise because it's very, for my ADHD brain, it provides a lot of like quick feedback because I get to go observe it immediately and see what the code is doing in a visual way. But going back to something else you had mentioned, your contacts with regards to like verb object, those best practices. I know like pieces of those are probably in the instrumentation spec, but I think it'd be great if your Ollie Garden MCP provides that context, right? It could be a central place for some of that key context that you found to be beneficial, and that way people can pull that context in, like the context that you have in your brain that you've written down now can be immediately pulled alongside of the instrumentation score, alongside of the other things that your API provides. I think that'd be pretty cool. And then I think the other thing that I had a thought of when you were talking was I would love to add Weaver support to the hotel instrumentation MCP, because a lot of customers, clients, they have their own custom things, right? And they will, and that's fine. That's what Weaver is built for. But being able to do like more schema validation type things, even though obviously this is all statistics, and so there is margin for error with regards to how these LLMs function, still you can provide like more targeted guidance, and you could supplement information based off of like a company's opinions or custom Weaver schema registry. I think that'd be really cool to be able to support.
The organization ID problem that I mentioned before, like the cluster name or the cluster.name or cluster underscore name, like absolutely, yes, absolutely. I think again, we are at the very beginning of this journey. I think of course we've been doing observability for some years now, and I have the feeling that on the backend side things are very mature. On the auto instrumentation side, things have a big legacy, and we are at a place where a lot of data is being generated right now. But I think we are at a time in our timeline that we now have the opportunity to rethink instrumentation in a way that is more targeted. This is not to say humans are not going to be there for that. I mean, of course, we still need people to reason, people to look at this instrumentation, to look at the outcome of those tools, look at those PRs and review them and say, yes, this is good. No, this is bullshit. This is not to blindly accept what those tools are giving us, but I think they provide a very productivity gain, or there is a potential for giving us a productivity gain in instrumentation. I'm very excited about it. Cool, Adriel, thank you very much for joining us today. This is our third live stream. The last one we had Yuri with Jamie from Honeycomb giving again the presentation that they delivered at Hotel Community Day, I think, the life of a span. This one here, vibe coding or microservices. We might have a part 2 to this one here in a couple of weeks' time, but thank you very much. For those of you who had not had the time to join today, this is recorded, so both on LinkedIn and YouTube. So you can play that later as well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.